My childhood home sat in a peaceful suburb of northern Ohio, where neighbors greeted each other warmly and trust ran deep. Halloween transformed our cul-de-sac into something magical. Carved pumpkins glowed on every doorstep, decorative cobwebs stretched across porches, and the scent of autumn bonfires drifted through the cool evening air. Nothing prepared me for the night that would forever alter my perception of our safe little street. October 30th arrived with the usual excitement. My group of friends gathered at my house for our traditional pre-Halloween celebration. We called it Horror Night, a ritual of scary films, ghost tales, and nervous dares to approach the abandoned Jenkins property at the street's far end. 6 of us huddled together that evening, all middle schoolers convinced we were brave enough to handle anything. Mom brought in pizza while we arranged our sleeping bags across the living room floor, surrounded by chip bags and soda bottles. The doorbell chimed around 10 o'clock. None of us expected visitors, so I approached the window cautiously. A small silhouette stood motionless on our porch. He child wore a crude scarecrow covering, the handmade kind with stitched lips and dark button eyes. Assuming it was a neighbor's younger sibling attempting an early scare, I pulled the door open casually. The figure remained silent, gazing upward through those unsettling button eyes. The covering appeared homemade, with uneven stitching across burlap fabric, as though assembled hastily from scraps. I chuckled nervously, offering candy despite the early hour, but received no response. After several uncomfortable seconds, the small visitor simply pivoted and departed down the steps. I dismissed it quickly. We returned to our film, competing to share the most disturbing urban legends we knew. Periodically, old floorboards groaned somewhere in the hallway, though I attributed this to the house's age and paid little mind. Tyler, one of my closest friends, questioned whether I'd secured the front entrance, but I waved off his concern. Our neighborhood felt completely secure. What intruder would target a residence full of adolescents on Halloween Eve? Past midnight, after everyone else had drifted to sleep, I ventured toward the kitchen for another drink. The house held an eerie stillness, broken only by the refrigerator's steady hum. Passing the front window, I stopped abruptly. Across the pavement, illuminated by streetlight, stood the same scarecrow figure. Completely motionless. Simply observing our residence. My chest tightened, and genuine unease washed over me for the first time that evening. I extinguished the kitchen lights, hoping my presence had gone unnoticed. I monitored the scene for several minutes, but when headlights swept past, the figure had vanished, as if never present at all. Returning to the living room, I attempted convincing myself this was merely a local kid's elaborate prank. I kept this encounter private, not from lack of fear, but to avoid sounding unreasonably anxious. Yet external sounds persisted, soft crunching noises resembling footsteps through dried foliage. I lay awake, eyes fixed on the darkness above, contemplating that strange covering. Something about its appearance seemed wrong, not commercially made, but aged, as though worn repeatedly over many years. Morning arrived with deceptive normalcy, despite my sleepless night. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, rendering everything seemingly innocent again. Tyler woke first, mentioning the disturbing creaking sounds he'd heard throughout the hallway. I laughed dismissively, though I'd registered them too. Nobody mentioned our mysterious visitor. By afternoon, we played outside, tossing a football around, pretending exhaustion hadn't caught up with us. Younger neighborhood children paraded past in costumes, displaying their plastic collection buckets. That's when something caught my attention. The residence across the street, where the scarecrow figure had stood, appeared completely abandoned. Windows covered with boards, grass overgrown, absolutely no indication of occupancy. Later, while assisting Mom with decorations for evening trick-or-treaters, I inquired whether anyone new had moved into the house opposite ours. She hesitated before responding. That property, sweetheart, has remained unoccupied for years. The Martin family relocated after losing their son. Her words struck me unexpectedly hard. I didn't press for additional details, but suddenly felt chilled, as though the atmosphere had thickened oppressively around me. That evening, our group chose to extend the sleepover through actual Halloween night. Initially, this seemed reasonable, safety through numbers, correct? We planned distributing candy, viewing another film, and remaining awake until sunrise. However, as darkness descended, I couldn't shake mounting anxiety whenever glancing toward the window. The vacant house appeared darker than usual, almost deliberately ominous. Trick-or-treaters arrived and departed steadily. Most seemed cheerful, calling out gratitude as we filled their bags with sweets. Then, approximately 9 o'clock, a small figure approached our porch. The light flickered as the visitor drew nearer. That identical scarecrow covering reappeared, same stitched mouth, same unsettling presence. The figure remained silent, merely staring at our candy bowl until my friend nervously dropped several pieces into the outstretched bucket. Without acknowledgement, the visitor turned and departed once more. Everyone assumed it was simply some child attempting to frighten us. But I sensed something deeper, recognition. I could identify this as the same individual from the previous night. Same slight build, same methodical slowness in movement. The way this figure moved didn't suggest a prank. It felt rehearsed, as though performed annually for years. The remainder of the evening dragged painfully. We joked to distract ourselves, but the laughter rang hollow and forced. Around midnight, when streets finally quieted, I peered through the window again. The scarecrow figure stood at our driveway's end, still facing the house directly. My friends thought I was fabricating this until Tyler witnessed it too. The porch light flickered once, then died completely. We all froze instantly. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared move an inch. I reached for my phone to capture photographic evidence, but the screen remained black and unresponsive. Then slowly, unnaturally, the figure rotated its head, not the body, exclusively the head, toward our living room window. Even from that distance, I felt the weight of its gaze upon me. Something about that movement felt fundamentally wrong, deeply unnatural. That's when our yard's motion sensor activated, flooding the driveway with bright illumination. But the figure had vanished. Disappeared completely. No sound of retreating footsteps, no running, no childish laughter, just the quiet rustling of wind pushing leaves across the pavement. None of us approached the window afterward. I barely managed any sleep that night. Every creak, every gust of wind made my chest constrict painfully. The house felt alive somehow, as though holding its breath alongside us. Around 3 in the morning, I heard what resembled soft footsteps on the porch. Slow and measured, stopping directly outside our door. Nobody else stirred from sleep. I considered waking Tyler, but didn't want to appear paranoid yet again. The sound repeated, 2 faint knocks this time, perfectly evenly spaced. I held my breath, waiting for a voice, a laugh, anything proving this was just a prank. Nothing came, only silence pressing heavily against the windows. After several minutes, I gathered enough courage to peek through the blinds. The street lay empty, lit solely by the dull orange glow of the streetlight. No scarecrow, no trick-or-treaters, nothing but the quiet hum of our sleeping neighborhood. I told myself I'd imagined everything, but my instincts refused to accept that explanation. When morning finally came, sunlight felt surreal, too bright, too safe, too normal. Mom was already preparing breakfast when we stumbled into the kitchen. She looked at us with a puzzled expression. "Did you boys notice all the footprints outside?" she asked curiously. We rushed to the porch and saw them immediately. Dozens of small prints leading directly to the door and back toward the street. They weren't typical shoe prints, they appeared more like outlines of worn flat soles, pressed deep into the ground. Mom assumed they were leftover from last night's trick-or-treaters, but I knew differently. The tracks led across the road, heading straight toward that abandoned house. Its door, which had always remained tightly shut, now stood slightly ajar, an opening just wide enough to suggest someone had recently passed through. By noon, police cruisers lined the street. Mom mentioned someone had reported suspicious activity near the empty property. I watched from my bedroom window as two officers approached the porch, disappearing inside the structure. When they emerged, their faces looked visibly unsettled, as though they'd witnessed something confusing and inexplicable. One officer knocked on our door later that afternoon. He asked whether we'd noticed anyone strange in the neighborhood the previous night. I hesitated before describing the scarecrow figure in detail. The officer frowned deeply and exchanged glances with his partner. "You're absolutely certain about that costume?" he asked quietly, his tone suddenly serious. When I nodded confirmation, he exhaled slowly through his nose and thanked me for my time. Before departing, he said something that has haunted me ever since. "The Martin's son wore a scarecrow mask every Halloween," he told my mother quietly. "He disappeared 3 years ago. We found the mask this morning on the old house's porch." I didn't say a word. I just kept staring out at the street, watching the wind move the empty swing in the yard across the road. That night, I left my blinds tightly closed. Still, part of me couldn't stop listening for that soft, steady rhythm of footsteps on the porch. I haven't hosted another sleepover since that Halloween. And every October, when the air starts to cool and the leaves begin to fall, I swear I can feel someone standing just beyond the light, watching and waiting. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share it with friends who love a good scare, and subscribe for more terrifying true tales. Because sometimes, the most frightening stories are the ones that really happened. At 12 years old, I convinced my parents to let me host a Halloween sleepover at our home. The plan seemed simple enough: watch frightening films, eat junk food, and participate in harmless challenges. My friends Tyler and Mark arrived carrying sleeping bags and plastic vampire fangs, excited for the evening ahead. We settled into the living room while my parents retired to their bedroom early. At least, that's what we believed at the time. Our residence occupied the final lot of a peaceful cul-de-sac, bordered by dense woods and an aging wooden fence. Beyond that fence stood a narrow backyard gate barely holding together with corroded hinges. It never properly secured, and my father always insisted it didn't require repairs. "Nobody ventures back there," he'd say casually. I didn't realize how peculiar that statement would sound until much later. The evening began typically for Halloween. We emptied our candy haul onto the floor, exchanging preferred items while laughing about the supposedly haunted property down our street. The lighting remained dim throughout, except for the gentle orange radiance of a decorative pumpkin lantern positioned on the table. It felt like the type of night where nothing dangerous could possibly occur, until we detected footsteps upstairs. Initially, I assumed my mother was getting water. The steps sounded heavy yet sluggish, like someone moving while half asleep. Tyler paused our movie when he registered the sound too. The noise traveled down the hallway, then halted at the staircase top. We all stared toward the stairs, anticipating someone's descent. After prolonged silence, I heard our front door click open unexpectedly. My heart skipped. My father always secured it before bed, so hearing it creak disturbed me deeply. Mark whispered, "Perhaps he's inspecting something outside." But it was past midnight. What could he possibly need to examine at that hour? I peered through the curtains and glimpsed him crossing the yard in his robe. His movements seemed unsteady, almost robotic, as though he wasn't fully conscious. He proceeded straight toward the back fence, toward that old gate specifically. The night atmosphere felt heavier, and for the first time, I didn't want to discover what existed beyond it. We debated quietly whether to follow him. Tyler suggested he appeared to be checking on something routine. Mark thought he might be sleepwalking. I wanted to wake him, but my mother's voice echoed in my memory, "Never disturb someone who's sleepwalking." So we simply stood there, observing as he stopped beside the gate and faced it, completely motionless. Minutes elapsed slowly. The air grew so quiet you could hear individual leaves brushing across the ground. Then, just as slowly as he'd approached, my father turned around and walked back toward the house. He didn't look at us through the window. He didn't look anywhere really, just straight ahead, eyes open but vacant and empty. When he came inside, he locked the door and ascended the stairs without uttering a single word. We didn't speak for quite some time after that incident. I remember lying awake for hours, staring at the dark ceiling, wondering why he'd gone to the gate at all. Something about it didn't feel right, as though he wasn't going there by his own choice. The following morning, I expected my father to act strangely or at least mention what had happened, but he behaved perfectly normally, making pancakes, teasing us for staying awake too late. When I asked whether he'd gone outside during the night, he looked genuinely confused and said he hadn't. He even laughed when I described what we'd witnessed. I remember his eyes, though. They looked exhausted, as though he hadn't truly slept at all. He dismissed it casually, but I noticed small dirt stains on the bottom of his robe. I didn't mention that particular detail. We packed up our sleeping bags, joked about the night's events, and Tyler insisted my father was simply playing an elaborate prank on us. I almost convinced myself to believe him. That Halloween became a story we told for entertainment. "Remember when your dad went into zombie mode?" we'd joke. But the following year, when October arrived again, I noticed my father acting increasingly distant. He'd sit on the porch during evenings, staring at the backyard, the same direction as the gate. Mom claimed he was simply exhausted from work, but even she avoided discussing it further. When Halloween night finally returned, my friends came back for another sleepover. This time only Tyler and I participated. We arranged the living room identically, candy piles, horror movies, and sleeping bags positioned by the couch. Everything seemed normal until my father descended the stairs after midnight. His eyes were open, but he wasn't acknowledging us. He walked straight past the television, past the front door, and out toward the yard once more. His pace remained steady but unnatural, like someone following a signal only he could perceive. Tyler froze instantly. "He's doing it again," he whispered urgently. We both rushed to the window, and sure enough, my father was heading toward the gate, the same one, same steps, same eerie calmness. We didn't move. We simply watched him stop there again, facing the fence. This time, I thought I detected something else, a faint movement beyond the gate, like a shadow shifting behind the wooden boards. I blinked and it vanished. When Dad turned back, his expression remained blank, as though he didn't even register our presence. When he came inside, his robe appeared damp near the bottom, as though he'd been standing in wet grass for extended periods. I questioned Mom about it the next morning, but she simply frowned and instructed me to drop the subject. She mentioned he'd been experiencing sleep issues around this time every year since before I was born. I didn't understand what that meant, and she refused to explain further. That night after Tyler departed, I walked out to the backyard alone. The air felt cold and oppressive. I stopped several feet from the gate, just staring at it intently. The wood appeared darker than usual, almost charred at the edges. The latch was rusted shut, yet somehow it still moved slightly, as if something had recently pushed it from the opposite side. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured him standing there again, motionless, facing that gate as though waiting for someone or something. I told myself it was nothing significant. But deep down, I felt the gate wasn't simply part of our fence anymore. It had become something else entirely, something I couldn't fully comprehend. By the time the third Halloween arrived, I'd stopped asking questions altogether. My mom barely mentioned it, and Dad acted as though nothing ever happened. But the nights leading up to Halloween were absolutely the worst. I'd hear faint footsteps in the hallway, slow, heavy, and always heading toward the back door. Every morning I found it locked, but the floorboards told a different story entirely. That year, Tyler couldn't attend, so it was just me alone. I told myself I'd remain awake all night to watch him, to ensure he didn't venture outside again. Around midnight, I heard the familiar creak of the stairs. My father's shadow moved along the wall, tall and sluggish. He wasn't wearing his robe this time, just a plain shirt, and his eyes looked completely empty. He walked past me without making a sound. I whispered his name, but he didn't flinch or react. The front door opened with the same slow click. I followed him out quietly, careful not to wake Mom. The backyard felt colder than usual, with thin fog hugging the ground. He stopped exactly where I knew he would, at the gate. This time, I called out louder, hoping to break whatever trance held him. "Dad," I said firmly. No answer came. I took a few steps closer. The fog moved around his legs as though drawn to him specifically. That's when I noticed something strange. The gate latch was undone, swaying slightly as though someone had just passed through moments before. The air felt charged, like before a storm arrives. I asked again, "What are you doing out here?" His voice came out soft, almost whispering to himself. "It's waiting for me." My stomach tightened painfully. I wanted to drag him inside, but something about how he said it made me stop. I felt if I touched him, he'd shatter completely. Then he turned around. His eyes weren't blank this time, they looked terrified. He whispered, "Go inside." But his voice trembled as though he wasn't addressing me at all. I backed away slowly, heart pounding violently. He turned back to the gate again, standing in silence, and I finally ran for the door. When I woke in the morning, the gate was closed again, latch rusted in place. My father sat at the kitchen table, pale and silent, staring at his coffee. He started locking his bedroom door at night, and every year after, he'd take a motel room during Halloween week. He never explained why. Years later, after we'd moved, I drove past our old neighborhood out of curiosity. The new owners had replaced the backyard fence, but that same crooked gate remained. For a moment, I thought I saw someone standing beside it. I don't go back anymore. But every Halloween around midnight, I still wake without knowing why. And sometimes, just before falling back asleep, I swear I hear that old gate creaking open again. If this story unnerved you, share it with someone who needs a sleepless night, and subscribe for more chilling tales. That Halloween weekend remains vivid in my memory, as though it occurred just yesterday. It wasn't supposed to be anything extraordinary, just a casual sleepover at my closest friend Chloe's place, a few horror films, some snacks, and a couple of inexpensive pumpkins from the grocery store. Her parents were traveling out of town, and it felt like the perfect arrangement for one of those almost frightening but still enjoyable kinds of nights. Looking back now, I wish we'd just stuck to watching the movies. Chloe's house occupied the edge of a tranquil street in a small Oregon town, surrounded by towering pine trees that absorbed the sound of the wind. We'd been friends since middle school, and this was our first sleepover at her new residence. The house possessed a peculiar charm to it, old wooden floors that creaked like whispers and walls that seemed to breathe whenever the furnace activated. I remember feeling both comfortable and slightly on edge, though I couldn't explain why exactly. We spent the evening laughing at terrible horror movies and consuming too much candy. Around 11 at night, Chloe suggested we paint pumpkins instead of carving them since her mother didn't want pumpkin guts scattered all over the counter. She said it jokingly, but her voice carried a nervous laugh that didn't quite fit the mood properly. We set up on the kitchen table, paintbrushes clattering in a glass jar while the television hummed faintly from the other room. We had 3 pumpkins total, 2 small ones for us and a larger one that Chloe said she found sitting on her porch that morning. It was oddly pale, its stem bent like a twisted finger. I remember teasing her, asking if she stole it from someone's yard. She just shrugged casually and said, maybe it wanted to be part of the fun. That small joke feels heavy in my mind now, like it meant something we didn't understand at the time. As we painted, the house settled into silence. The wind outside made the trees sway, tapping their branches lightly against the windows. Every so often, we'd hear faint scratching sounds, probably from raccoons or the old siding shifting in the cold. Still, each noise made us glance toward the hallway as if something unseen was moving just out of sight. It wasn't fear yet, just the kind of unease that grows when you start paying too much attention to silence. Chloe painted her pumpkin with neat black patterns, spiderwebs and crescent moons that looked like something from a vintage postcard. Mine was more chaotic, bright orange streaks mixed with uneven brush strokes. We laughed at how messy mine looked, and for a while, the atmosphere lightened again. Then Chloe froze mid-laugh and said she thought she heard someone walking upstairs. I paused, listening carefully. The ceiling above us gave a single long creak, then stopped abruptly. "Probably the house," I said, trying to sound calm and reassuring. She nodded, but neither of us spoke again for a few minutes. The only sounds were the soft strokes of paintbrushes and the rhythmic ticking of the kitchen clock. Outside, a dog barked in the distance, and somewhere far off, a car door slammed shut. By the time we finished, it was almost 1 in the morning. We lined up the pumpkins on the counter to dry, proud of our little display. The big one Chloe had brought in looked strange, though. In the low light, the paint seemed darker, thicker, almost wet in a way that didn't make sense. I reached out to touch it, but something about it made me stop. It didn't feel like paint anymore. It looked like something that didn't belong on a pumpkin at all. We decided to sleep in the living room. Our sleeping bags spread near the couch where we could still see the pumpkins through the kitchen doorway. The glow from the nightlight made them look harmless, almost cheerful. But as I lay there staring, that big pale pumpkin seemed to have changed somehow. Its shape looked softer, like it was sagging slightly under its own weight. I told myself it was just the lighting playing tricks on my tired eyes. Chloe eventually drifted off, her breathing slow and even. I couldn't sleep at all. The house made too many small noises, the kind you can't unhear once you notice them. I heard faint creaks upstairs again, followed by what sounded like a slow, dragging step. I told myself it was pipes or air ducts, anything but what my mind wanted to imagine. Still, I pulled the blanket higher and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally took over. When I woke up, pale light filtered through the blinds. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your stomach tighten before you even know why. Chloe was still asleep, one arm over her face. I turned toward the kitchen and froze completely. The large pumpkin had rolled off the counter onto the floor. Its side had cracked open slightly, as if something inside had pushed from within. At first, I thought it was just a split from drying paint, but then I saw it clearly. Something small and white lodged halfway into the orange flesh. I stepped closer, heart pounding violently. It wasn't a seed. It was too smooth, too perfectly shaped. My mind didn't want to accept it, but my eyes already had. It was a human tooth. I didn't scream. I just stood there staring at it, my mind completely blank. The air in the room felt heavier, like the walls were pressing in. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, that maybe Chloe had found a fake tooth from a costume kit. But when I nudged it with a paintbrush handle, it didn't move easily. It was embedded deep, as if it had grown there naturally. When Chloe finally woke up, I showed her. She didn't believe me at first, but the second she saw it, her face went pale. "What the hell, Emma?" she whispered, backing away. "That's not funny." I told her I wasn't joking, that I just found it there. We both stared at the pumpkin in silence. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then, without warning, the clock on the wall ticked once, loud, sharp, echoing through the room. We decided to throw it out. It sounded simple enough, but neither of us wanted to touch it. Finally, Chloe grabbed a trash bag and a pair of kitchen gloves, forcing a laugh to hide how shaken she was. As she scooped it up, the pumpkin made a soft, squelching sound that turned my stomach. She gagged and dropped it once, muttering that it felt warm. I helped her carry the bag outside to the garbage bin by the driveway. The morning air was crisp, the kind that smells faintly like smoke and wet leaves. Everything felt strangely distant, muted. As we shut the bin lid, I noticed something odd, the faintest impression of a footprint in the damp grass beside the porch. It wasn't ours. The shoe size looked bigger, and the heel was pointed inward like whoever it belonged to had been standing there for a while, watching. The rest of the day passed in an uneasy blur. We tried to distract ourselves with movies and snacks, pretending that morning hadn't happened. Every now and then, I'd catch Chloe staring toward the window, her expression vacant, like she was listening for something. When I asked, she brushed it off, saying she was just tired. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe we'd thrown away whatever that thing was, and it would all end there. As night fell, the house felt colder. The heater clicked on, but the air stayed chilly, almost damp. We moved our sleeping bags closer to the couch again, this time leaving the kitchen light on. Neither of us admitted it, but we both wanted that faint glow nearby. Around midnight, the wind picked up, scraping tree branches against the roof in long, uneven strokes. Every creak sounded personal, like the house itself was awake. At some point, Chloe whispered that she thought she heard footsteps outside. I paused the movie, holding my breath. The sound came again, slow, deliberate steps on gravel. I crawled toward the window and lifted the curtain just enough to peek out. The yard was empty, washed in pale orange from the streetlight, but the garbage bin was tipped over, the trash bag gone. We sat frozen, listening. The silence between those faint footsteps and the wind felt endless. Chloe whispered that maybe an animal had dragged it away, but even she didn't sound convinced. We locked the door, double-checked the windows, and finally decided to sleep with the TV on low for background noise. For a while, it helped. The soft flicker of light made the room feel less empty. But then, sometime after 3 in the morning, the TV went black. The power hadn't gone out. The hallway light still glowed faintly. The screen just turned off by itself. In that new silence, I heard it again, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the kitchen. It wasn't the usual house creak. It was sharper, closer, like fingernails against wood. I sat up slowly, trying not to wake Chloe, but before I could stand, a knock echoed through the room. 3 short taps. The sound came from the kitchen doorway. I turned toward it, heart hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. Nothing moved. The light above the counter flickered once, and for a split second, I thought I saw a shadow near the pumpkins, but there weren't any pumpkins there anymore. The counter was empty. Then, faintly, I heard something roll across the floor. When I finally stood, I could see it in the doorway, a small orange shape, wobbling to a stop near the rug. It was one of the smaller pumpkins we'd painted the night before. I hadn't seen it since morning. I didn't move. The pumpkin tilted slightly, like something inside it had shifted. Then almost silently, something white dropped from the crack along its side and hit the floor with a soft clink. Another tooth. Chloe stirred, mumbling my name. I didn't answer. My eyes stayed locked on that tiny impossible thing lying on the floor. The room felt heavier with every breath. A cold draft moved through the house, though every window was closed. Then I heard it just above a whisper, a low voice from the dark part of the kitchen. It said my name, slow, careful, almost familiar. I don't remember running, but somehow we were outside in the driveway, barefoot and shaking, watching the house from the edge of the street. The kitchen light flickered again, and I could have sworn I saw movement near the window, like someone leaning close from inside. The police came after Chloe's call, searched everything, and found nothing unusual. They said it was probably a prank or raccoons. They didn't see the footprints by the porch. Chloe moved a few weeks later. I haven't been back since, but every Halloween I get a strange urge to paint another pumpkin, like something's waiting for me to finish what we started. I never do. Still, sometimes when I walk past porches on cool October nights, I swear I can hear that soft tapping sound again, 3 short knocks against the darkness.